Yes, I better put the camera back on, huh?
Hey, if you can't tell, it's been a minute since we last did one of these.
I
Welcome,
was dancing
everyone.
to the music.
That's right. Here we are, another episode of Teamwork a Better Way. I'm Christian Napier. This is Spencer Horn, who is the Wizard of Oz behind all of the controls.
Yeah,
Spencer, it's been a minute. How have you been?
good. It has been a minute. My goodness, it's been great. I mean, you and I, we've had lunch with with our good friend Patrick. We like to get together regularly, so we've gotten together since the last time we did a podcast, which has been over a month, right? I mean, that was like early September or something.
Yeah, I think it's been that long. That's probably the longest we've ever gone between podcast episodes. But you've
Well,
been super
I was
busy.
gone. I couldn't. I mean, I was literally all. I was in Singapore and Indonesia and Chicago. I was on the road for an entire month, and I'm glad I took a little bit of a break because that took a lot out of me.
Well, welcome back. Welcome back. Great to have you back here in these United States, here in the great state of Utah, here in the Salt Lake Valley. And, I mentioned United States because we've got a massive election coming up here in a few days. And it seems to me like everybody's on pins and needles,
Yeah.
Spencer, about this election. And I don't know if you're feeling it. I'm certainly feeling it. Uh, it just seems a little more tense, and so I'm really excited and eager to have a conversation with you about that and understand the impacts that these kinds of events can have on our teams and what we can do to kind of counteract it, and individually and also within our teams. So
Yeah, I mean, really the focus of today is how to have team harmony and really doing that over political discourse and disharmony is really important for team productivity and work productivity and really our mental well-being. It is tense, and I'm feeling it, and I'm getting sucked into doom scrolling. I'm sure you are too. We'll talk about that. But I was just texting with with my daughter this morning, and our whole family is in on the discussion, and she was talking about how in 2016 her husband was in Harvard Business School at the time, and this is a generalization, but she said most of the students had major meltdowns, and so there's going to be challenges no matter who wins. There's going to be people that are frustrated and anxious, and so no matter what's going on, whoever wins, there's going to be some frustration, and there is frustration now on all sides, and it's impacting productivity. It's probably impacting your health and your sleep if you live in the United States. And quite frankly, what happens here in the United States impacts people all over the world. So there's probably some anxiety globally about what's happening here as well.
absolutely, Spencer, you sent me an article um, that the title of that article was "Star Psychologist Adam Grant Just Explained How Not to Lose Your Mind with Anxiety," and he cited some interesting statistics
Yeah.
in this article. Some statistics from a Forbes health survey that was conducted, and also from the American Psychiatric Association.
Yeah.
I'm curious uh, to hear your thoughts on those statistics. 60% of people saying election has had a slightly moderate or significant negative impact on their mental health, and a bunch of others. I'll let you run with that, but I'm curious if what you're seeing with your clients and people that you talk to, both here domestically and abroad, if they're feeling that as well.
It's everyone that I talk to individually is feeling some type of anxiety, and it seems like most people have very, very strong opinions on what's happening one way or the other. And there are very, very few that are kind of neutral and middle ground. And so the article also talks that 43% of people are more anxious than they were last year at this time. So many of us are anxious. And then there's another number, Christian, that I think is really interesting, and that is 73% of respondents claim that the election itself is making them feel anxious because, and there's a couple of reasons. Obviously, everybody's worried about the future. You and I have talked about a phenomenon in the past on some of our episodes about how negative news has a stronger impact on us than positive news. And it's a survival mechanism. And Adam Grant talks about that. That's part of the neuroscience of what's happening right now. But we have discussed this phenomenon in the past, and it's happening again today because due to the fact that we are more concerned, we're actually more motivated by the potential risk or the potential possibility or the possibility that something negative might happen over a positive reward. We spend more energy on that negative news. Therefore, organizations, political planners focus on messaging that taps into this human reality to get our emotions going to hype us up for their political candidate. What do you think about that?
I totally agree. Uh, they cite this primate study, the snake in the grass versus the bananas in the trees, right? And how uh, primates react more strongly to snakes in the grass as opposed to bananas in trees. Uh, and that, social media and traditional media, they've really got that down to a science, right? They know that, I think there was a study that showed that, uh, if headline was written positively or negatively, the negative headline generated much more engagement, right, than the positive
Exactly.
headline, because of that's how we're wired, right? We're just wired that way. And so, another thing that I thought was quite interesting about this was, uh, research showing that even a few minutes of negative news can have an impact on your mood for the entire day. 3 minutes of news that's negative can impact you 6 to 8 hours later, leaving you feeling worse, right? So these are very, very powerful, uh, biological, neurological impulses that people have been able to exploit.
And exploit, I think, is
For
the perfect word, Christian. Yes, keep going.
no, so uh, you know, and it's very difficult for us to kind of wean ourselves off of that negativity, because it is so kind of ingrained in us. It's wired into us, right?
Yeah.
Uh, that you use the word uh, doom scrolling, right? So uh, it's a difficult thing, but we do it because it's hard to turn our eyes away from that stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just talking to. I'm part of a. I have a. Um, what's it called? A mastermind group. Brilliant individuals on this mastermind group that I meet with once a month, and we're all dedicated to writing books. And these are all very accomplished business people. And one happens to be the president of the Chamber of Commerce in Utah County, and he is specifically writing a book on all these just positive experiences that he's had. And he says every time he writes an article about a positive experience, he gets very little interest. But if he writes something that's sensational and clickbaity or potentially salacious, then everybody wants to read that. And he's like, I've got all these positive stories, but nobody's interested. And it's really a conundrum. I think that, yeah, there was even in this Adam Grant article, they did a study done by Van Bavel's PhD student, Claire Robertson. They analyzed 22,000 A/B tests on different headline options. So, one of the things that I talked to this individual about is you can go to YouTube, for example, and you can test or you can find which headlines are the most popular by clicks. And so A/B testing is you have one title, and then you have which is A, and then you have B title, and you see which people are interested in most by how often they click them. And so in this research, they said we found the exact same news story when it had a negative headline was generating more engagement, and it was getting more clicks than if it had a positive headline. And so this is what we're talking about. And I have to admit, Christian, I start my day by watching stupid news because I'm so invested. You know what's going on, and I certainly don't know that's the best way to start my day. And I find personally that it's easier for me to watch those stories that are in line with my beliefs, and harder to watch those stories that are talking against things that I believe. And I'm aware of this, and I'm like, wow, I'm curating stories that kind of fit my narrative and get me riled up. But I get more anxious when I watch those stories because I try to watch both sides, and it's hard. I don't know. This is not necessarily our topic. I'm just sharing my experience. I don't know what your experience is.
No, I have the same experience.
Yeah.
I granted, I don't really watch news on television, but I will consume media in other ways, and I find myself in the morning doing the same thing. And what's interesting to me is, I usually set aside some time to do some, not to get too religious here, right? But some scripture study, or studying some messages. And sometimes I find myself really having to talk myself into doing it because I would rather doom scroll, right? I'd rather, but because it's very interesting and it's important to me and impactful and whatnot. Uh,
It is to me
it
too.
takes it takes for me. It takes discipline to actually be able to say, okay, I need to shut this off. I'm getting in my car. I'm driving to my office, and this is what I'm going to listen to in the car. I'm not going to listen to this, and I'm not perfect at that by any means. I'm just telling you, it's hard for me sometimes to actually switch it off in my brain, and try to feed my brain something else.
Yeah,
It
well, I
really,
am doing the same in the car. I mean, yesterday I drove a long ways, and so I try to always listen to a positive podcast. I say try because I don't always do that, but most of the time I succeed. But I am also very focused on my faith and reading the scriptures. However, there's been a little bit of a problem with that where we are in our studies right now because it's end of the civilization type of discussions. Like, oh gosh, it's been a difficult time, and I actually teach this in what we call gospel doctrine, so I have to study it and prepare. I get to, and so I do find some of the positive lessons that have happened in past civilizations from civilizations that were destroyed. So all of this is happening and converging at the same time, and it's certainly stressful. So what do we do about it? Because Christian, not only is it individually hurting our mental health, it's also impacting our team productivity. So you asked me, is this happening at work? I am not having CEOs saying, we've got this problem. I know that they have other problems with team alignment. This is just adding to it. So they haven't specifically singled this out in my conversations with them, to answer your question. Yet it's happening in cafes and in families and in homes, and it's happening in work because I've got reports of it happening. So my experience is some research that I found from another article in Forms by Chris Westphal, and he cites some of the same studies that Adam Grant was studying from the American Psychology Association. And listen to this. She says 70% of adults say that the future of the nation is the number one cause of the stress in their lives. Republicans and Democrats. In the United States, we have mostly two parties. And I know some places around the world have different types of democracies where they have a pure democracy, and they have a percentage of cabinets that are made up of different parties. They have multiple parties. We have what's called a republic, or really a representative democracy. And And so they are, all of us, Democrat and Republican, are united. This is interesting. We are united about having concern for the future. And I love the fact that she points that out. And according to Lynn Bufka, a clinical psychologist at the American Psychology Association, the deputy chief of professional practice is saying that unity is something that we can build on. With the election just 1 week away, it's easy for political tension to spill over in the workplace. While voting takes the attention of a divided nation, and so work still has to get done, Christian, while this is happening in the workplace. And so, as you know, I mean, you in the workplace, I am. My clients, our clients, our organizations are seeking unity over political division. And we have to find common ground in order to be able to be productive at work. And so there are ways that we can do that. And so what we want to talk about for the rest of the time, we're not going to, I don't know how long we're going to spend today, but I want to share just a couple of ideas for us to be able to improve mentally. And you've identified one, and that is focus on, your faith or things that are important to you that are uplifting. But let's talk about a few ideas that businesses and leaders of teams can incorporate to help them improve productivity in the workplace.
Let's do it.
So let's start with the first one. We've talked about some of the causes, right? Where we have this natural bent on negativity. Get very clear. Step number one: get very clear about job descriptions, and making sure that people know that is expressing a political viewpoint actually a part of your job description. And just explain, sometimes it's time to practice 5-finger management. What is 5-finger management, Christian? Do you know?
What is it?
Taking your hand, palms down like this, and holding it over your mouth, all 5 fingers. Stop talking. Just stop talking. Put your hand over your mouth and stop. She says, it takes just 5 fingers in the palm of your hand, place it over your mouth. Just as we all have the ability to have conversation, silence is always an option. And would silence be golden for you? Think about what would happen. There are many ways to share your political opinions. Go out and volunteer. Go out and register voters. I remember living in Las Vegas, going out and knocking on doors for my political candidate, and and getting involved in party primaries and going to represent your community. There's so many ways you can donate, to your favorite political campaign. That's a great way for you to individually make a difference. If you want to make a difference, there's a way to do that. The challenge that we have is someone convinced against their will is what?
Coerced.
Of the same opinion still.
Yeah.
And if they're coerced, they're really not changing their opinion. And so if you're trying to convert, I see so many videos online of people that are just fighting, with people that disagree with them, and that again is clickbait, and it gets views, but trying to convince people against their will is problematic. So my work requires me to work with clients that have views on all political, across the political spectrum. And my goal is to help them regardless of what their political views are. And we work together great. We have great relationships. We have great conversations. So, and most of the time we avoid political discussions. So just keep your mouth shut on that. Focus on productivity. You can make a difference individually on your political front, but at work, focus on work. So that's number one. Is it part of your job description to talk about it? If it is, great. If it isn't, stop it.
Yep. It's a great advice. It's great advice. Work doesn't have to be the place where you air all of the grievances and pontificate about why you feel the way you do, even though you feel very strongly and perhaps justifiably so, right?
Absolutely.
And I think there's there's an innate desire to feel heard and seen, and so sometimes we have an urge to speak up, and it comes from a righteous place, but
Yeah, a desire to
it
make a
actually leads to, I
desire
think, the
to
second.
make the world better, right?
Yeah, it actually leads to the second point in the article that you sent to me, which is the the Pyrrhic victory, right?
Yeah, right.
You can win the battle and lose the war. you, you you speak your mind, you say your piece, um, but in the end, what have you achieved? You haven't really convinced anybody to change their opinion, and you've damaged relationships, and you've just made everybody feel more tense.
And you and I had a conversation at lunch the other day about the importance of relationships. It can be one of our greatest treasures that we have, and um, it certainly is the currency of success in business is the quality of our relationships. And so I think it's really important. And the challenge that we have is that you've got news organizations like NPR saying there's a lot of messaging out there that's being generated by AI that is driving it's these AI messaging is driving some public opinion. And the question is, can you control the political opinions of your colleagues? And the answer is, of course, no, unless they're begging you to say, please help clarify what's going on. I think when it comes to voting, one of the biggest discussions we have is our on constitutional amendments. For example, here in the state of Utah, we have two constitutional amendments that are on the ballot. And so I like to get into research, and I spent almost 3 hours filling out my ballot. Why? Because um, I wanted to understand each candidate. I actually called my local Senate candidates on both parties, and one of the parties answered, and the other one didn't. And I had a great conversation, and I actually voted for someone that is not my registered party because I agreed with their opinions and their policies. I try to actually do some research and not just listen to what is said on the media. Do my own research. Go to their websites, call them, and I think we have to do the work to really enjoy our democracy, and you
Oh,
can do that on your own.
yeah, something I want to say about that, because it was pointed out in another study. It was kind of linked to the main article that you sent to me earlier,
Yeah,
which was enunciated or articulated by Harvard professor Steven Pinker, which is, don't aim to be right, aim to get it right. And this requires an amount of intellectual humility, right? So what you have done is exactly that. Hey, I'm going to do the research, and I'm going to let that kind of guide me to where I want to go. It's better to get it right than it is to feel right. And oftentimes what we do is we just do what we feel. Okay, well, this feels right. And I'm not discounting the importance of feeling, but at the same time, to be able to kind of humble yourself and say, okay, I'm going to open my mind, and I'm going to investigate different opinions and different people. And most importantly, I think, Spencer, is that I wish I myself, but also more people would do this, is go to the source,
yeah,
right? Because oftentimes what we consume on media is
is surrogates.
people opining about what other people have done
That's right.
and not actually going to the source,
So
so
I
we
go to
learn it.
their website. I go to their websites. I go
Yeah.
to their profiles, and I call them. if I, I mean, I can't call the presidential candidates, but I think that's absolutely
No,
so.
but you can look and react to what they say, uh, primarily, instead of looking to see what pundits say about what they said, right?
That's right.
So actually going to the source, I think, is super important, because it allows you to have a bit more unfiltered view. It's not filtered through the lenses and opinions of others. You get to experience that for yourself, but it does require A, effort, and B, as I said, humility to be willing to do that. And so uh, I commend you. You've set an awesome example, I think, for all of us to follow.
Well, like I said, we have a responsibility as members of any of the countries that we live in to we enjoy so many rights. Those are not just that those don't come without a cost, and I think we have a responsibility. One last thing on don't attempt a pyrrhic victory. A week ago, we had a choir practice, and one of our choir members said something political and ended up having to send a text to everybody apologizing and just saying, "I'm so sorry if I offended anybody." So there's an organization as well where we don't want to, no matter what your faith, in my faith, which happens to be Christian, we try to follow the teachings of Christ, and who taught us to love everyone. And oh, I forgot what I was going to say. It was actually something about this, this idea of offending others, and we have to do our best not to do that. And so, that, and I know what I was going to say. So we were told to love our enemies, right? And what better place to learn to love your enemies than at church? Because how often have you been offended at church? So that's a great lesson for us. Love your enemies. And I'm sorry, I hope I didn't get too religious for you. Okay, let's go to number 2. The question is, can you be fired at work, Christian? What do you think?
Depends.
For speaking
Yeah, for speaking politics. So talking about
your
politics,
mind.
can I be fired at work?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a good question. I mean, on the one hand, you have a freedom of speech, right? We have a right to be able to articulate what we say.
Yeah.
On the other hand, we don't want to be put in a position where we're creating a hostile work environment that makes people feel
Ah.
uncomfortable. Like uh, the and so yeah, I think um, the author of the article quotes an employment attorney who says that most free speech rights generally don't apply at work, right? So we think, oh well, it's I
The
have my free
constitutional
speech,
right.
my constitutional right to say these things. I have this blanket protection. Doesn't matter what the context is, but actually that's not necessarily the case, right? In a work setting,
Because your
because we
behavior and
also
communication can be disruptive. And so in places that, for example, that have at will, employers can hire and fire at will. You can be fired for being disruptive, or as you said, toxic.
absolutely, and so you need to take that into consideration before spouting off.
Yes, absolutely. So, and then the other idea is to consider where you play if you want to win. So, let me just quote a little bit of this paragraph here because I want to make sure I get this right. Trying to change someone's mind can be a recipe for a fight. We've been talking about this. There's an author of a book called Why We Are Polarized, Ezra Klein, says that partisanship can now be thought of as a mega identity with all the psychological and behavioral magnifications that implies almost all voters now have their minds made up. You didn't need to persuade them of whom to vote for. Indeed, you couldn't persuade them who to vote for. What do you think? Can we persuade people who to vote for or who not to vote for?
Well, it's a really good question. I think on an individual level, and this is just me, I'm just riffing here, right?
Yeah.
I think it's really, really hard. But uh, at a macro level, we can see how uh, people use the tools that are available, uh, our technologies and so on and so forth, to help shape public opinion, and we can see the evolution of that over time, right? So uh, I'll give an example here, and it might. I don't want it to be. I don't want it to appear controversial or as if I'm advocating one side or another. But look at uh, uh, the LGBTQ gay marriage. How has public opinion swayed on this issue over the last 20 years? It's been significant. Uh, even as far back as the Obama administration, you had the sitting president of the United States saying that he was against it, right? And in 6, 7 years, it went the other way. So I think it's a fallacy to say that people can't be persuaded one way or another. Certainly, probably not in a 5-minute dialogue, but over a long period of time, with sustained messaging. And again, I'm not taking a position one way or another. I'm just saying that we have seen this in our lifetimes. We have seen people's attitudes towards certain things shift over time, and it doesn't have to take a long time. Through the effective application of the tools that we have available to sway those opinions. And so, yeah, I think in the micro, it's very difficult. In the macro long run, people's opinions definitely can be swayed,
Oh,
and we
and I hear
can.
that, but the point here is when we're talking about the workplace, the whole point of this book and this article is trying to convert your office mates can create unnecessary confrontation, and that just reduces team performance and team productivity. So, um, let people come to do their own work and hopefully listen to voices that they trust and believe. And if someone changes their mind, great. That means they're doing research and being thoughtful about something, and I think that is perfectly appropriate. But in the workplace, to do that, certainly a few days before the election, not a good idea. Uh,
Yeah, one other thing I'd like to mention about that, Spencer, um, is there are initiatives that can be put in place in organizations that can be perceived by some people in the organization as politically motivated or politically adjacent, right? So, and again, I'm not trying to court controversy, and I'm not taking a side here, but we saw in recent years uh, large scale efforts to include DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion efforts in corporations.
right.
And it's been met with mixed results. Why? Because you've got a certain percentage of the people in organizations who react very positively to it, and certain percentage who react negatively to it, feeling like, hey,
Yeah.
you're trying to force values on me that I don't necessarily totally agree with. And and so I think we have to be cognizant of that in organizations and as leaders, that even when we do something that is well-meaning, uh,
It can have a
let's
political
make sure that
perspective.
we take into consideration where our people are at, and take a very understanding approach, right? Because uh, these things, they have courted controversy. And again, I'm not taking a side. I'm not saying one is right, one is wrong here. I'm just saying that sometimes in organizations, even if in our efforts to create safe workspaces for people, we can inadvertently create unsafe workspaces because we start bringing to surface things that have been kind of pushed down. They've been pushed down in organizations, and we just have to be aware of that.
It's
And,
interesting
and
you
so
you 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 say this. There's actually, I mean, what's really going on in America right now is super interesting. You have, for example, labor unions who are typically voting one way as a or endorsing one type of candidate are not endorsing them today because a majority of their members are not supportive of that decision. I think that kind of falls in line with what you're talking about, trying to make decisions that reduce divisiveness within your organization. Is that somewhat in line with what
Yeah,
you're
so I just kind of wanted to bring up that little nuance there, because we're talking oftentimes about individual communication
yeah.
conversations we're having with our coworkers. Uh, but you deal with leadership, you're working with CEOs,
Yeah.
and I think CEOs need to take care that uh, that the spaces that they're creating for people to be productive in
Are
are
safe.
truly safe spaces,
Yeah.
and that we don't, we just go in fully informed when we're trying to undertake an initiative. what the impacts of undertaking those initiatives might be, and plan for those, even if they come from a place of benevolence, right? They come from a place of good intention. Uh, we have to just exercise some caution there. And again, I'm not taking sides. I'm
No, I
just
think that's
saying
very,
that this is
very
something we're seeing. We're seeing it in states that are passing legislation, kind of pushing back on these. We're seeing it in companies who are wrestling with the ramifications of trying to it's just a bit ironic sometimes. We're in an effort to be inclusive, uh, the the approach that we take uh, inadvertently alienates some of our people, right? And so we just have to be careful. That's all I'm saying there.
absolutely right. Okay, so let's go on to the next suggestion, and I love this, Christian, and I feel uh, I mean I feel this is one that we can all get better at, and it's something that I teach when I talk to executives and senior leaders who have a propensity to talk rather than listen. And as older generations, we want to teach the younger generations everything that they need to think, right? Because we have all the answers, and I say we in quotes, or have all the answers in quotes, actually. Um, the Remember the value of listening. As senior executives, we can learn so much from the younger generation. Imagine if we could just listen to each other more, what the outcomes would be, rather than to just force again our beliefs and our worldview and our opinions on someone else, even in a corporate setting. Think of how much knowledge that the youth have today in technology, and you can marry that with your experience and organizational knowledge, and if you can marry those things, you can create magic. But it requires you to actually stop and listen. And I think the same happens and is applied here in this political arena. If someone has opinion that's different from you, be curious instead of just shutting them down. Listen to what they have to say, and that's just a simple form of respect, Christian. That you respect somebody enough, especially people who disagree with you. We talked about our enemies. I think one of the greatest definitions of empathy that I have heard is that you respect your enemy enough to study them and their tendencies. You think about I was reading about Air Force pilots who don't value the talents and abilities of their enemy are more likely to die than those that have respect for their. And isn't that interesting? I mean, that's actually a form of empathy to respect people that think different than you, to learn from them, to grow, and to be curious. Any thoughts that you have on that?
I love this. One thing that came to mind as you were talking was, what does it mean to listen? Sometimes, we hear this word listen, but, and I am guilty of this, a person is talking and I'm hearing what they're saying, but in my mind, I am formulating arguments to counter what they're saying.
Yeah.
And I think in this context, Spencer, that's not really listening, right?
No.
That's not trying to really understand a person and why they feel the way that they feel. Because if I feel the urge to just start ticking off evidences in my head, so I'm going to come back with this, I'm going to come back with that, then I'm not really seeking to understand them, right?
Right.
I just want to. I am storing ammunition. I'm not listening.
That's right. And
And
that's what happens a lot on social media. If you look at social media, all the clickbaits are, we see these zingers that so and so destroys this MAGA individual or this woke person, you know. And so it doesn't matter what side you're on, whether you're liberal or progressive, or, you know, or whatever it is, or conservative. You know, your hero destroys, is what it always says, the opponent. And so, and they're always just a little short segment of a zinger, right? And we have this low attention span, small attention span, and it takes. I find this is my observation of my behavior, that when I see people who are speaking slowly and having thoughtful comments on social media, I zip over it because I just don't feel like I have time. And I think that's terrible. So sometimes I actually force myself to slow down and say, okay, what are they saying? I don't know if you've experienced that.
Yeah, I've experienced that too. This is again just my own personal experience, but I find that that type of clickbait, so and so destroys this other person, um, to be uh, it becomes exhausting because it always seems like this is the, I'm publishing this video because this is the one video
That's
that
going to
is
change
going
everybody's opinion.
that's going to change everybody's opinion, right? This
Yeah.
is the one that takes down Trump, or this is the one that takes down Kamala Harris, and this is it. And 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 even from the same influencers, they will have like 12 of these in a day, every day. So and so destroys this
That's
person.
the power of AI,
And,
because it's able to
and
make all these little short videos that are
right.
clickbait, and it's
And
just
it's like,
filling the airwaves.
okay, well, you've been at it, this destroying thing for months or even years. Like, are you really getting anywhere with this? I mean, I just find that personally to be exhausting, and I can't really, I don't, I just can't lend my time to those anymore because I can't believe the headline, because we have seen these videos for months and months and months, and we're still very polarized, and everything's within the margin of error, and so uh, these are not making a difference. They're not making a significant impact, I don't think, and so, you know, just kind of cut it out, folks, with the so and so destroys somebody else, or uh, you know, this spells the end for this candidate because they said this or that or whatever. It's like,
Hey Brian, thanks for listening. So we threw your comment up on the screen. Really appreciate your thoughts, and I'd love to have questions from the audience. Anybody who's listening, we really appreciate when you chime in. But here's what I kind of closing on this. Remember the value of listening. Um, just, remember, in life and in business, where you put your attention is where you find your results. And right now, my customers, my clients that I coach, that I consult with, that I speak to, they deserve my attention, just like your team, Christian, deserves your attention. CEOs, executives, team leaders, your team needs you focused on solving problems for your clients that ultimately make the world a better place. And you need to be leading and creating the direction and the culture that creates an environment where people can perform at their best and really can concentrate on solving the problems of the business. So don't fight Pyrrhic, or Pyrrhic, however you like to pronounce that, Pyrrhic victories. Don't try to change the minds of other people. Focus on what matters most. Listen more. Focus on solving the problems of business and not politics. I think those are some great ideas. And I want to end with some of the suggestions that Adam Grant gave, and I absolutely love them. And they did a study in the article, what they actually paid people. Can you imagine? I didn't get paid to do this, but they paid people to stop following certain toxic people on the internet. And what's interesting is they found just 3% of social media users are toxic. However, those users generate 33% of the content populating our feed. So there's a inordinate amount of information coming on our feeds from just a very few people. 1% of communities, and this is worldwide, launch 74% of conflict. 0.1% of users spread 80% of fake news. And so what they did is they did this experiment. It will pay you. Stop listening to these negative influencers and instead replace it with positive. So my wife and I share food, these food videos all the time, because whenever we're going to Chicago or we're going to Cyprus, where you're going, we actually follow all these food Instagram posts that or channels or accounts, and we share these with each other. Like, oh, we just can't wait to go have this or make this. We actually download recipes all the time. We've got like the 100 best different types of pizzas or pies or whatever, and then we start making them. And so we share those kinds of things. But the other thing that we do is Jana and I both follow things like NASA, National Geographic. And one of the suggestions that Adam Grant and his team are saying is replace this anxiety with awe. Instead of following these clickbaiters, follow when they talk about the universe and the heavens and the stars and nature. I find this to be true. Christian, one of the things I love best about mountain biking is just the sense of awe that I have when I get to the top of the mountain and I say, I did that. And I look out over this beautiful valley and I can just, I'm up there. The air is clean. It's cool. I see animals. I see God's creations. I just feel good. And I've replaced this anxiety with gratitude, with wonder, and with awe. What do you think?
I love it. I remember reading that as well. And, one of the things that was really interesting about that is this PhD student, or no, the professor, Jay Van Bovel, who
Yes.
NYU psychologist who conducted this study, said it was the most powerful intervention they've ever seen in the lab, and that the effects of doing this lasted
How
over six
long did it
months.
last?
Over
How
6 months, right?
so
And
in
that
other words, when
people,
people stopped listening to negative stuff on the internet, they had less anxiety and were happier for how long?
for more than 6 months, but it wasn't just stopping the negative stuff; it was replacing it with
Yes.
the positive, awe-inspiring stuff. Because you, as you said, rightly so, you get to the top of mountains, and I've seen pictures of you at the summit of various peaks, um, and you know what you see is an incredible backdrop, right? Your perspective changes. You increase your elevation, you see more, and you get this sense of grandeur when you're at a peak at 11,000 feet, or if you're flying in an airplane over Mount Rainier and you look down and
Isn't that fun?
you see the mountain as you're flying into Seattle, right? You're you're up on above the clouds, and you can almost see the curvature of the earth. I mean, it just is awe-inspiring. And
Flying in and out of Seattle, I've always seen the Olympic Peninsula, and I have wanted for years and years and years to go. And my wife and I went to Olympic National Park last year for the first time. Blew our minds. One of our favorite national parks of all time. So whenever we travel, we actually have a poster that's framed in our house of all 63, I think 63 or 4 national parks in the United States, and we've been to 21. And so whenever we're traveling for business or anything, we try to throw in a little bit of awe.
yeah, it's just amazing the impact that it has. And so I'm glad we're closing on this, because
Yeah.
it's absolutely true. When we replace the negativity with this positivity that's anchored in awe and wonder and grandeur, it gives us a different perspective on things, and it helps us put things into perspective too. You know, you see these mountains that have been they've existed for millions of years. Uh, and things will come and go, and
Into
let's
perspective.
focus on that. Let's focus on the things that really matter. Tying it back to the beginning, what really matters are the relationships that we have, right? And so,
Protect those
if we can,
relationships.
yeah, avoid becoming prisoner of the moment and focus on the things that really have long term personal value to us. I think is absolutely vital. So
Can
this has
can
been a
can I throw
great
something
conversation.
out, Christians, before we shut down?
Yep.
I'm going to say something that you and I have been friends for over 20 years, and I you are one of the people I respect most in the world. I think you are an incredible mind, great listener, and yet you and I disagree a lot on pers- uh, just political topics, and I think that's brilliant. And I think that's one of the um, I think that's something we need more of. As a matter of fact, you and I are bringing a guest on Monday. We're actually having another podcast on Monday. We think this topic is so important, listeners, that we've invited a friend. Do you want to talk about that, or do you want me to talk about that?
Oh, I'm super excited to have our conversation on Monday on election eve here in the United States. We've got a special guest returning to the show, Hall of Fame speaker, one of the most funny, intelligent, talented, entertaining people you could ever meet, and genuine people that you can ever
Thoughtful,
meet.
just
Thoughtful
smart and
author
thoughtful.
of a book called The Promise,
Yeah.
and he lives his life by this. Jason Hewlett is going to be our guest, and he's had some recent experiences, uh, political experiences that have had some material consequences for him, and I'm really eager to explore that his experiences that he's had, and see how we, even coming from different sides of the political spectrum, can find unity
Right.
in a very divided world. So we're really eager to continue the conversation. I can't wait to
Yeah,
talk with you.
well said, Christian. And the title of that episode is "Building Bridges: The Power of Civil Discourse in a Divided World." So we're going to continue this theme with Jason's perspectives and what's been happening. He has been uh, singing and talking and presenting in front of thousands, tens of thousands of people around the country, and so I think this is going to be such a great episode.
Super looking forward to it, and I thank you, listeners, viewers, subscribers. We're so grateful to you for joining us. Please continue to like and subscribe to our podcast, and we'll catch you again soon. See you next week, Spencer.
See ya.